What's a good target wattage on stock electrical? I mean, the basic rule of thumb is 1500 watts, give or take a couple of hundred watts. I mean, giving you anywhere from 1300 to 1700 watts is a good range. If you're like me, you've gone and researched your amplifiers and your amplifier possible choices when you read that, and you probably looked at fuse ratings and concluded that the current draw might be a little bit high. I mean, your mids and highs amplifier has a 60 amp fuse, and your subwoofer amplifier has a 70 amp fuse, and it's 130 amps of current draw. But your alternator only makes 95 to 105 amps. And on top of that, the car needs at least 60 of those amps to keep things like the screens going, to make spark, and to keep the battery topped off. So, I mean, what gives? Is 130 amps of current draw too much for your stock electrical system? It might be. But I'm going to tell you right away that the amplifier is not constantly drawing that high current at that fuse limit. Your in-car entertainment doesn't behave like fans or headlights or climate control, right? Those devices are going to draw constant current, but music is dynamic. Music has big booms, we have sharp cymbal crashes, we even have big vocals during choruses or as the music crescendos, but in between that there's a bunch of quiet passages. And this dynamic nature of music means that we're not going to have a constant current draw. The music draws current as the tunes are going to get louder, and it's going to relax in between those demands. And we'll illustrate these musical waveforms later on in the video, so be sure to stick around for that. But before we discuss why going a little overboard isn't harmful, I do want to talk to you about what happens when you draw current beyond the car's capability. Now, there's going to be passages where the amplifiers and the rest of the car's electrical needs are going to demand more current than what the charging system delivers. The battery is going to take up the slack in this case, right? The voltage drops are going to happen there, and it'll happen outside of an acceptable range. And if it happens outside of an acceptable range, it's going to damage electronics, maybe even your amplifiers themselves. But what happens after that is you have less voltage, and the power demands are there. You have more amperage, and with more amperage, you tend to pull more current. You end up possibly blowing fuses, you risk harming your vehicle's electrical system, stuff like that. In the worst case scenario, you do risk harming the car's electronics, your ECUs and stuff like that. Now, the thing is you can hear a system that's taxing a car's electrical system. Your vocals are going to become fuzzy, you'll hear ticking noises in your mids and highs when the bass hits, stuff like that. So, nothing damages equipment more than volume knob abuse. So, turn it down when it starts to sound bad. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's illustrate what music waveforms look like. This is going to serve as an approximation for current draw. And it's an oversimplification, and it's really only meant as a starting point. The application I'm using for this illustration is called Audacity. It's a free-to-use audio editing software suite, and it also does a fantastic job of illustrating waveforms so we can visualize them. All right, so what you see on the screen right over here is a 50 hertz 0 dB wave I ripped from a setup and test CD. This track is to set gains on your subwoofer amplifier and to detect clipping from the head unit. We'll use a track with a negative 5 decibel waveform to implement 5 decibels of gain overlap when we set the gains. Let me know in the comments if you'd like a video on gain overlap. Now, getting back to this, notice how this fills the whole track for 45 seconds. Playing this track at full volume with speaker level impedances is going to result in a large and constant current draw similar to an engine fan or the car's headlights. That could be detrimental. Now let's go ahead and compare that to one of my favorite songs. This is 33 by Smashing Pumpkins. And notice how 80% of the track is empty space when compared to that 0 dB test tone. And that's what I mean by quiet passages. Between these big peaks, we've got a lot of empty space. Now there's a few peaks where it reaches the full mark, but they're few and far between. And this is an alternative rock track, so it starts off quiet and then, of course it crescendos. It's not full of hard charging guitars. It's not like hip hop or EDM with constant pulses of bass and snare and repetitive loud vocals intended to keep a party going. No, this is quiet. But I want to go ahead and visualize a bass-heavy hip-hop track, and that would be Mount Westmore's Big Subwoofer. Now, this track manages to fill the void quite often, but it's still mostly empty space. You can't really see it here because I'm, optimizing this for YouTube, but when you have it on a much larger screen, you can see that about 60% of this gap is empty, and that's going to give ample opportunity for your electrical system to catch up with the music. Now, at the beginning of the video, I had talked about mids and highs amplifier. We talked about a subwoofer amplifier. And we definitely need to illustrate what happens when we split the signal into an active four-way setup. And we can use Audacity to mock up what that looks like. Audacity has effects that we can apply to the different tracks. And we can apply low-pass filters to illustrate a waveform for woofers, and we can apply high-pass filters to illustrate a waveform for tweeters. We can also combine these filters to make bandpass filters for mid-bass and mid-range. Let's take a look at 33 by Smashing Pumpkins. I've split the signal here using the aforementioned effects feature of Audacity, and we've implemented 24 decibel per octave high-pass and low-pass filters, and we've also combined the filters to make bandpass filters. Right? So this mimics the filtering performed with a DSP. The subwoofer is 80 Hz and below, and the mid-bass is 80 to 350 Hz. The mid-range, of course, is 350 to 3500, and the tweeter is 3500 Hz and up. Your setup may be different, and this is just for illustrative purposes. I'm showing you how much signal gets split. We notice how the subwoofer channel here isn't putting in much work compared to, say, the mid-range. The mid-bass and the tweeters aren't really doing as much because the mid-range is got vocals, it's got the synthesizer, the piano, and the guitar, and there's not a whole lot for the rest of the speakers to do. Now, we can switch to a bass-heavy track. We'll use Mount Westmore again. And again, you'll notice that when we split this up, we still, each one of these starts drawing current at different rates. You'll notice that there's more draw in the mid-bass when the sub-bass isn't going, and vice versa. There's a lot of draw in the vocals because this is a vocal-heavy track, but there's not a lot going on in the tweeters. And you'll notice that in some passages, the subwoofer does more than anything else, and in some passages, the tweeters do more than anything else. So that's something to be aware of here. Basically, the lesson here is that splitting the duties of each amplifier means that each amplifier draws current according to their needs. Now, while this is going to draw more current than a single amplifier pushing full range, each amplifier gets longer breaks as illustrated by the filtered waveforms. Now, you may draw current beyond the amplifier fuse rating. That happens, and it takes a lot to blow a fuse. But understand you're not constantly drawing that power either, even at full volume. And on top of that, you're not driving around listening to music at rock concert volume levels at all times. Maybe you do, but don't worry about 1500 watts on stock electrical. Your system can handle it day by day. Thanks.